when I found I passed my exams, you know, by then I'd started going to a cycle of sort of elation and depression. Got very depressed after my exams. I was sure I'd failed. Somehow I passed, and in those days, well, it's still a bit the same, but you have to study to be an accountant. You have to study and work, you know. So I went and told my boss I passed, and he said, well, it says in the song, what are you going to do? And I said, leave. And he thought that was a good idea. I don't know if he just thought he'd be glad to be rid of me, or he realised I really wasn't so happy. Because now I realise it wasn't the work that was the problem, it was just something inside of me. I just didn't know what I was doing or what it was. When I left school, what I really wanted to be, because I now knew what I wanted to be when I left school, because right near the end of term, a friend of mine who fancied himself as Buddy Holly, you know, he had these dark rimmed glasses and a guitar, he asked me if I'd join a music group he was forming. And so we played at the end of school review, it was called, and it was the first time ever they'd had sort of pop music or whatever you'd call it. And we played, and I was the drummer. And it was sort of planned and sort of not planned. The three of them in the front, the guitarists, you know, like the Beatles, they all played cool and they had nice, neat ties. And I had a big, it's called a Windsor knot tie, a Windsor knot in my tie. And I started fooling around, probably because I wasn't a very good drummer anyway. And somehow, a lot of people liked this. And of course, being a bit juvenile, you know, nothing's changed. I started really showing off, you know, and I became the hit of the whole show. Actually, people I'd never had any words that came up and congratulated me, even when I was standing in the toilet trying to pass water. They come up to, yeah, well, yeah. So I now knew what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a rock and roll drummer, and also I liked the acting in the Shakespeare play. But you know, I couldn't tell my conservative father, who I now realise was very introverted, and my sister reckons was probably depressed all his life. I mean, he's a good man, but it's just his own chemistry, and his own parents were very introverted. So poor man would, you know. So that's where I ended up sort of studying to be an accountant, and somehow I don't know to this day how I managed to. Everybody came out of the exam saying they'd done this and they did this and this and this and this, and working out. And, oh yeah, well I reckon I did okay, and I was so depressed I just wanted to, you know, go home and go to bed, and that somehow I passed, and a lot of the people who were talking about what they'd done didn't, you know. And one friend of mine, I said, you know, you're far better than I don't know, and yeah, he agreed with me. He knew much more than I did, but somehow, maybe it was my angels. I don't know what, you know, something guided my pen. So I went on holiday with a Buddy Holly friend to Saint-Tropez, and then when he came back 2 weeks later, I just stayed there, and there was a pretty girl there who was singing in the cafes and making money, and I wasn't as pretty as she was, but I reckon I could sing better than she could, so I tried, and I could make a bit of money there. And then I'd arranged to work in the champagne harvest, so I went up to the Arenes, and there were some other English guys, and there's a famous English song called 10 Green Bottles Hanging on the Wall. And if one green bottle should accidentally fall, there'd be 9 green bottles. It's a children's song. So we translated that into French and were singing it. Because we worked in the cellars because the harvest was late, but the guys were not very amused at the idea of all these green bottles falling and smashing. And then I went to Paris and met Jane Fonda and Roger Vadim, and was in a film by Roger Vadim, which I didn't appear in the final cut. I must have ended up on the cutting room floor. And then a friend of mine, a guy I met, said he had a contract in Italy to sing, and so I got on a train with him and 3 others. And when we got to Italy, of course, there was no contract then. And so the other 2, that they got on the train and went straight back to Paris, but I had no money, so I had to stay there. So anyway, this is a song that came out of this time, but as you understand, it's worked out a bit different.